Welcome to another exciting week with our Mission Matters Club. Every single week we host a speaking engagement. Today's topic is reinventing fundraising for nonprofits. There's been a lot of changes in the space and there's been a lot of evolution. And so we want to discuss how the entire nonprofit industry or just the fundraising aspect of it has changed. And so just so everyone knows, these conversations are recorded. So we'll be sharing it on our website and across all of our platforms thereafter. And so just to give some everyone context for whoever's listening in and isn't familiar with Mission Matters, to give you some background, Mission Matters is a media company focused on the needs of entrepreneurs, executives, experts. We highlight their stories to amplify their missions. We want to inspire and educate future generations. And the way we go about doing this is by creating tons of content. So we are also published books. We published about 250 authors in a wide variety of books. So always looking for new business leaders as well that we can create content with. And then along with that, we also have the podcasting side of our business where we manage about close to 200 talent in wide variety of industries. And so we help them launch podcasts, build their audiences as well. And so with that, every single week, we invite our authors, our podcasters, and anyone who's a part of our community to join us for these conversations. And there's pretty engaging dialogues. And so the format of these dialogues is it's more like open flow, open format, and kind of like a fireside chat. Imagine being at a dinner, with your friends, and you're in the sit down at a round table where anyone can essentially chime in, right? So this is very similar to that. And along with that, Adam, basically my counterpart, is going to coordinate and essentially do some moderation and then ask some of the basic questions. And then of course, everyone can chime in, ask the questions as well and engage. So with that, we always start off with introductions. And so Adam, we'll just go around the room and introduce folks and then take it from there. So Adam, pass the mic to you.
All right. Thank you, Chirag. And this is Adam. And for everybody that's on this panel, you just want to say your name before you speak, just for etiquette, so that, because again, this is going to be recorded and distributed. So if you say your name first, it makes it easier on the listener because they're not going to be able to, see the little graphic. But that being said, let's just start with going around and doing some quick introductions. So Matt, if you want to kick it off.
Sure thing, Adam. So my name is Matt Cook. I'm the director of agency at Mission Matters. So pretty much all things podcast.
Fantastic. Jeff?
Hi, everyone. It's Jeff Gorskog, the director of publishing at Mission Matters. We publish authors. Happy to see some of my authors here. Like Chirag said, we've done over 50 books in the last 5 years. So this is a great place for everybody to kind of share new ideas and kind of scale all of our impact. So happy to be here.
Thank you. And Patrick?
Sure. I'm Patrick Lang. I'm the founder and CEO of Certainty Management. We're a profitability firm. We focus on cost reduction and deep discount benefits for small businesses. But we also use what we're good at to help nonprofits raise funding. So this is a good topic for us to be a part of.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. And Joanna, I think I invited you correctly. I don't know if you're a listener today or if you'd like to speak. Hopefully you want to speak, but if not, if you're not in a place where you can, not a big deal. All right. So
I'm on. Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm sorry I'm late.
Oh, no, you're fine. If you want to just briefly introduce yourself, you're right on time. We were just...
Thank you. So I'm Joanna Pineda. I'm CEO and Chief Troublemaker of Matrix Group International. We're a digital agency working almost exclusively with associations and nonprofits, and we help them increase membership and generate revenue. So for many of our clients, they're fundraising because they're nonprofits, or if they're an association, they're accepting donations, or maybe they have a C3 or a foundation that they're fundraising for. So fundraising is huge among my clients.
That's awesome. Thank you, Joanna. And when we came up with this topic originally, I'm like, oh, Patrick and Joanna need to speak because they have things to talk about. And I think we'll all get to know each other a little bit more on today's topic. So I guess maybe just to get us kicked off, if we talk about maybe kind of like the state of what nonprofits are doing today, I think that'd be a good start. Like, as coming out of the tail end of the pandemic, everything that's going on, like I can't imagine that they've fared all that well necessarily as a whole. Does anybody care to comment on that maybe has a little bit more expertise on that end or what they've seen? Because I can't claim I work day in and day out with nonprofits, but Patrick, Joanna, or anybody else has any data on that?
So I can start. This is Joanna. Mm-hmm. So what we have found during the pandemic is that different organizations have fared differently. Like Professional societies have done decently well. Trade associations, some of them have struggled, some have done well. It's dependent on the industry, it depends on, kind of the governance. But in general, fundraising has been challenged. So if you're a C3 providing services in your community or you're a nationwide organization, fundraising is challenged for lots of different reasons. One is people right now feel poor. And so they don't feel like they have extra to give. They're worried about inflation. They're worried about the rising cost of everything. I think the other thing that's happened is many kind of things that people have done historically they've been delayed. So for example, we've got some organizations that use events to really generate interest and encourage, fundraising and gifts. Maybe they were doing galas, maybe they were doing, benefits. Those things, were kind of put on hold for a couple of years. And it's been tough to get people back into the events, definitely tough to get people to engage at the same level virtually. So in general, fundraising has just been very challenged. I think also the kind of the bigger meta thing is that I think in general as a country, we've got a trust issue where people are not trusting their institutions. And I think what's happening is, kind of even the nonprofits that maybe historically were trusted to do good kind of lumped in with other big institutions that we don't have trust in. And so in general, I think it's really hurting the prestige and the prominence of some organizations.
Those are really, really important insights, really great insights, Joanna. I mean, she is spot on with the challenges. For some organizations have done well, but many are struggling, and fundraising in general seems to be struggling. And I think there is a trust issue, and just nationally, in a number of different sectors. Trust is a challenge. It's come out of a different political climate. It's come out of the pandemic itself, the different media sources that people are starting to really question, and the list goes on and on. But just to kind of break down fundraising maybe a little bit for any listeners that aren't involved in that space and aren't familiar with it, most fundraising comes down to one of three approaches. You're either asking for donations, you're trying to sell something, or you're writing grant requests and trying to get grants and ultimately trying to get donations as well, or some sort of payout. In my experience, fundraisers fall into one of three categories as well. There's those that are doing very well at it, which seem to be the exception, but there are some out there that have great outreach and great messaging, and they're doing a good job at it. There are others who are trying to do a good job, but many of their donors, many of their staff, even their volunteers, are feeling the burn. Right, they're feeling burned out. And then you have the oftentimes smaller nonprofits and others that are trying to fundraise, but they don't know where to start. They don't have the experience. There may be a sports association with a bunch of football teams or baseball teams. They're a nonprofit, but they're a bunch of soccer moms, or they're a bunch of parents that they don't know where to start. And so they're grasping at straws, if you will, with this huge need, but without the expertise, without the experience to know where to even begin. And so it's a convoluted, complex arena. And there are obviously, like with anything, with business, with publishing, with marketing, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly, or the good, or the very good, those that are trying but struggling, and those that don't even know where to start. And so
this is Adam. I just recently did an interview with Diana Hoyt, and I've known her for, I don't know, quite some time, since I think my early 20s actually, and she's been in the nonprofit space for, I don't know, like 40 years. And what she's done is she's come kind of from the software angle originally, then moved on to consulting and things like that. And, when she looked at the nonprofits that were doing, well, or that kind of did fare better over the pandemic and things like that, like what both you said about trust and otherwise was insightful. But she basically, in saying that, said that the way that the relations, or I should say the way they communicate with their donors, is what kind of made the difference throughout the pandemic. So she gave an example pretty specific about somebody that, she gave, it was a small donation, it was something like a $25 donation. And she got, like, immediately after that, she got a thank you card from I think it was the CEO. She got another thank you card from a regular postcard as well. And then she got like a handwritten note from one of the board members. And like at that point, she was like, oh, she told her husband, she says, and she said this in the interview, she says at that point, she was like, she was like, oh yeah, we're going to be giving to this organization probably forever. Like, they were pretty much hooked on the level of attention that they were paying to their donors. And so I'm just curious on if in anybody's experience, if they've, and this could be whether you're working professionally or whether it's somebody that you give to that's done something special that made you feel like, oh wow, like we want to be a part of this. I'll open it up, and I have a little story on that one, but I'd like to maybe open it up if anybody else has had any experiences like that from a nonprofit or something that they've given to and or worked for or consulted for that we're doing something special.
This is Patrick again, if I can interject. We work with a nonprofit that does a good job at this. It's an organization named Operation Underground Railroad, and they're focused on helping rescue kids from slavery, from sex trafficking. They were started by a former Homeland Security agent who was frustrated with the jurisdictional issues and the red tape. He finally quit this really great federal job, started his own nonprofit, recruited a bunch of ex-Navy SEALs and law enforcement, and now they do these sting operations rescuing kids from child pornographers and sex traffickers and so forth. What's interesting is while they do get large corporate donations, the largest percentage of their revenue and their inflow, my understanding, is what they call their ambassadors. And they are just the little donors that are giving $5 a month, $10, $25 a month. Those have added up to millions of dollars. They're always looking for more, but they do a really good job of outreach. They're being contacted and posting media and videos and telling stories. They've produced several documentaries about the topic. It's a dark topic. We don't really want to talk about it, but we need to. And to your point, I think what they're doing special is they're building a community. They're building a brand that is educating people on the fact that this horrendous industry is happening not in Bangladesh or somewhere, not in Afghanistan. It's happening right next door. And so it's something that, talking about reinventing fundraising, nonprofits have got to understand the importance of that branding, that messaging, that constant contact, that community. OUR, as they're called, has done a really good job at that.
Hi, it's Jeff Gorskog. Wow, that sounds like a really incredible organization and some very innovative approaches. And I think I'm certainly not an expert in the space, but when I see certain concepts and ideas kind of raise their hand, I think that there's certainly an opportunity. If we look at the GoFundMe space, if we look at where social marketing and social media has benefited, certainly having an innovative communication strategy and starting to realize, yes, like you don't have to have a handful of major donors. You can have this on a localized basis. So figuring out how to empower new generations with innovative ideas. I have a nephew who's doing his own kind of independent project to raise money to support wildlife in Africa. And this is all happening kind of very regionally on social media. Again, I don't know, what the execution looks like, but it feels like we have, new generations that we need to empower with with what it means to be of service, what it means to be philanthropic, how it feels good to get to the root of what we're talking about, because these aren't transactions, and sometimes they start to feel that way. So, when we can, and it sounds like that's partly of what this organization just talked about is doing, is, bringing some light to dark issues, but also the ability to make people feel like they can make a difference, I think is super powerful.
Hey, so it's Joanna, and I got two things here. One, I used to be on the board of this nonprofit called Doorways for Women and Families, and it's a nonprofit in Arlington, Virginia. And what they're trying to do is end homelessness and domestic violence. I was on the board for a long time, and I would give every year. And one of my favorite things that they would do is when you made a gift, like past a certain level, they would have the board chair leave a message. And I remember the board chair at one point was a guy named Mark Riley. This guy would leave the most amazing thank you message on your voicemail. He never expected a call back, but I remember saving one of those messages and thinking, what an amazing thank you message. Like, this guy just knew how to say thank you. So anyway, that was a great story. Like, learn how to say thank you. And I remember I actually used to be a fundraiser. My first job out of college, I was a fundraiser for the San Francisco Education Fund. And I'll tell you, fundraising has changed so much from, when I was just out of college and today. And I guess one thing that I would say is there's a generational thing. I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but there's a generational thing where there are some, folks who will only give online and other folks who still do direct mail. And then there's a certain category of donor who will only give to events. There's another category that will only give if they have a special connection. And then you've got the high net worth individuals who act really more like foundations. So I think the landscape is just much more complicated for fundraisers. But I always say to my clients, let's treat this like anything else. Who are your target audiences? What do they need from you? How are you going to reach them? And where do they hang out? And then unfortunately, we call it the splinter net, like they're everywhere. So I just think it's a tough landscape, and it's crowded, right? So like if somebody says, it's the end of the year and I want to give to an organization that's helping trafficked girls, for example, there's a lot of organizations in that space. How do you figure it out? How do you do research? How do you trust that the stuff that you're reading on the website, how do you trust that the reviews that you're getting are accurate? So then what ends up happening is we refer to our network, and our network may have limited reach and may not know about some of these organizations. So anyway, tough environment.
Hi, it's Jeff Gorskog. Yeah, no, to kind of build on that, Joanna, I think it's become infinitely more competitive. And I think with more transparency, we become, a little bit more suspect, right? So, you start to look at what percentage of, donations, some of these nonprofits, you start to look at, how much of it's spent on overhead and how much of it actually, gets to where you want it to go. And you start to realize, like, these are big companies with big overhead, they have a lot of expenses, and in some cases they're maybe not making as much of a difference as you hope they would be, which I think is driving some of the narrative. And then the other piece, and I have a couple of friends here in Los Angeles who are on boards of big nonprofits, and what they've done is they're competing for some of the most, the CEOs, the people managing and running these companies, they are like trying to go out and find, the smartest, brightest, hardest working men and women. So they're really, they're competing with tech startups to find kind of innovative founders, because what we've come to find is, that this is not just a slam dunk business. You need like real operators. You need real creative approaches. You need to staff and admin and operate like you would in the most competitive of segments. And I think that's kind of forcing, to your point, I think that's forcing people to have to up their game. And yeah, when you're dealing with so many different demographics and approaches, it's hard. I mean, you can really kind of dilute the strategy, I think.
Yeah, it's a really good point.
Hey, so
this is Adam, this is Patrick. Go ahead, Joanna.
Go ahead. I was going to ask a question, but please.
I'd much rather listen to you. Your thoughts have been fantastic. But seriously, I was just going to say, Jeff, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's competitive, and you can't just run a nonprofit like it's a volunteer organization that's selling Kool-Aid on the corner, right? The only difference between a for-profit and a nonprofit organization is the word for. But they still have all the same expenses. They have insurance, they have overhead, they have to recruit, they have to retain, they need benefits. And so there's these nightmares of CEOs that are making millions of dollars running these nonprofits, and the public gets up in arms about that, as they should, I believe. But they do need to run that organization as a professional organization. One of the things I like about OUR, just another plug, is that the CEO takes no salary. he lives off of. He has several children, but he said, I made a commitment from the beginning that I would not draw a salary from this organization. He earns it on his books and other things that he's done. But that's it. That's an anomaly. That's very unique. Ultimately, the nonprofits they've got to, and maybe we're getting into the next part of the conversation, but they've got to be able to start thinking outside the box. They've got to consider new ways of fundraising and new ways of funding these projects. There are some ways they can do that, but ultimately, in my opinion, it needs to come down to for-profit and nonprofit working in tandem. They need to work in partnership. There's a lot of synergy that can happen. I can share some examples as we continue going here, and back to the other topic or the other question before, Joanna made a really good point about, or who was it that said they got a thank you card, they got a handwritten letter, they got a note. It doesn't take a lot to wow a customer. Customer service is so poor in so many sectors that when you go that extra mile and you do something like a handwritten thank you card or a phone call even or something like that, those go a long ways with donors, with members, whether they're the $5 donor or the $1 million donor. There are things you can do and they need to, in nonprofit, to stand out and to go that extra mile, because it does go a long ways. And just like you said, we're going to donate to this company forever because they felt appreciated. So we can come back to some ways to reinvent it, but those are my two thoughts. But Joanna, please.
Well, two thoughts. One is, this whole notion of like what percentage of an organization's budget is being spent on overhead. I got to tell you, I don't think it's necessarily the case that an organization with a higher overhead rate is less effective. And I'll just give you an example. The truth is, for the organization that gets a lot of few but high value foundation grants, they've got lower overhead because they don't need a full fundraising staff to be doing the direct mail and managing social. So I think it's a little bit unfair. I mean, I see some organizations where if they're grassroots organizations and they really need to be cultivating the smaller donors, that just takes time. And it's expensive to cultivate those $5 a month donor. And you hope that you can keep them forever, through some type of monthly recurring giving, but it costs more money. So I'm just going to say that. The second thing I was going to ask you guys is, what have you seen? This is to Patrick's point. What have you seen in the way of new and interesting things that, organizations have done? And I'll start with two things. One is, this is one of our clients a while back. What they did is they partnered with a for-profit, and basically the for-profit said, for anybody who posts with this hashtag, we'll donate $1. And they reached out through all their networks and they said, look, I think Johnson & Johnson was the donor. And they said, Johnson & Johnson will donate $1 for every photo posted to Instagram with this hashtag. And the hashtag was for the campaign. And they made a lot of money off that because a lot of people said, I'll post a photo. And they didn't have to provide an email. They didn't have to provide their contact information to Johnson & Johnson. They didn't really even have to provide contact information to the nonprofit. So that's one thing that we've seen that was hugely successful. The other thing that we've seen that works really well is new donor onboarding campaigns through marketing automation. So you get the donor regardless of what size. And if you do a really nice job with these onboarding campaigns, you can do a drip campaign at the time of donation, 2 weeks later, a month later, 3 months later, et cetera. And they could be simple, plain text messages from the CEO, saying thank you from a volunteer, from whatever. If done well and you have clean data, these are really, really successful. And for me, it's always this paradox that something that automates some of these touches when done well actually makes you high touch. So I tell all my clients, whatever you're doing, invest in some kind of marketing automation. New donor thank you, new member onboarding, new staff onboarding, new client contact onboarding, whatever it is, it's totally worth setting it up.
I completely agree, Joanna. You took the words out of my mouth. Unfortunately, most people don't act, they don't respond on the first contact, and so they need to be dripped on. They need to be in that funnel or that automation that continues to reach out to them. It's one thing OUR has done well. There's other organizations that do it well, but you need to get your message in front of them and in such a way they don't feel like they're just being sold. It can't be a request for a donation every time you hit them. It's got to be, this is what we're doing. This is how it's impacting people. You're creating trust through your videos, through your posts, through your experiences. I mean, I keep referring to OUR. I just think they do a really good job, so they're a good example. But they'll take video of one of their actual missions, actual operations, and bring you with them, and you can sit and watch. They have whole documentaries and so forth that are done about it. That you understand better, and truly you can get a sense of what's going on and how they're making a difference. And so as a nonprofit, they have to do that type of thing. They have to, one, have the constant contact and the automation that's dripping on these potential donors and these existing donors and keeping them engaged. And they have to produce content that tells there are, like with any marketing, nonprofits have got to think outside the box. They've got to be willing to be creative. They need to do this automation that's working 24/7. They need to be non-salesy. They need to produce content. They need to connect with for-profits and propose joint ventures and agreements that are win-win, like the one that Joanna shared about Johnson & Johnson. It's a brilliant example of exactly what we're talking about. Here in Las Vegas, where I live, there's a charity called Lighthouse Charities that works with refugees, and it helps them get settled and learn English and get their citizenship. And one thing they did is they partnered with all of the big hotels in town. The hotels donate to them their towels when they kind of run out of steam and they start, losing their oomph. And this charity takes them, they get them for free, they take them, they cut them into strips, they serge the edges, and then they sell them back to the hotels for cleaning cloths. So it's win-win for both sides of the table. It's a really great example of what we're talking about with for-profit and nonprofit working together. There's a benefit to both of them. There are multiple other examples, but that's a pretty good one.
Anybody have other examples of really cool things orgs are doing?
Yeah, I got one the other day. So we purchase a lot of I think it's the audio from Audio Jungle, I feel like is the name of Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, that of the name of the site that we buy a lot of our audio for the podcast shows. And recently I purchased from them for a long time. And this is something new that I feel like it's something new they've done because I've never seen it before, is what they do is they give every person that purchases something from them, they give them a tree in their name. And it's really good. It was through Tree Nation. And Tree Nation has this I think a pretty great back end in terms of kind of after I received that tree, I was like, oh, wow, that's awesome. If you literally click the button, it shows you the tree, all the other good stuff around it. And then there's this little button there that quite obviously wants, if you want more information about it. So I went down the rabbit hole and I was like, oh, that's a great idea. I like to give to, for our clients, or, if we bring somebody on the show, or interviewing somebody, or it's something for us to consider doing, that would be a great way to kind of multiply that effect, because it was I think on their back end, like their automation, all of those different things made it really easy to be a part of it, and then made it really easy to want to be a part of it. And their setup and the user interface and everything else, like every year company gets a forest. So Mission Matters Media Forest was born, right? And then what it also does is it tracks your CO2 offset. So there's a bit of analytics. It's probably beyond my understanding, but there's a bit of analytics on the back end. I haven't really dove too deep into it yet. But even if you don't choose to do anything, that company already donated a tree in your name or in your company's name, whatever it happened to be. And then you already have kind of like a certain amount of relation to that. And it was just a really good experience, and it was easy. And then obviously and then the next logical step was, well, how do we get Mission Matters involved with this? Like, especially just thinking realistically that we do want to be, as a company, to offset some of what we do. So obviously we're in book publishing, right? So that that's paper trees, right? So that would be a good way for us to consider how we give back, is planting more trees, right? So that was one that really stuck out in my mind, and I'm like, wow, like and that's where it was something to me that was it was pretty creative, and it was like something that I'm like, wow, probably there's low hanging fruit, like pun intended there, for many nonprofits nonprofits out there to think about how to engage and get companies involved and to create that user experience, even on the back end. Maybe it's not CO2, like offsetting CO2 emissions, but maybe it's something else, right? I don't know. But that was all just done really creatively, where if I hadn't kind of gone through their funnel in that manner, and I'm really wasn't introduced to them by them, I was introduced to them based off of one of their clients giving us the gift of a tree, right? So I think I wanted to share that example as the one that really stuck out to me recently.
Again, so our company is named Certainty Management and Profitability Firm, right? We do cost reduction. But it occurred to us that we could do more than just make income. We could make a difference. And we actually use our cost reduction work to help nonprofits raise funding. And what we do is, for example, let's say it's a church or a foundation or a hospital or whoever is looking to raise money. We will set up a website for them. They share it with their members, their alumni, their donors, etc. And they invite their members to load either their personal bills or their business expenses. We renegotiate better pricing for them. We pay them for every bill we help with, whether we save them money or not. Every bill that gets loaded to that website that is branded to that customer, we pay them a dollar amount per bill. We know that it's going to come out in the wash. We can save on about 80% of the bills we look at. So we take a loss on 20% of them, but we help on the others. We call this the Certainty Partners Program because it's a way for nonprofits and for-profits to work together. Again, most fundraising, you have to ask for a donation, try to sell something, or write a grant request. With this, it costs nothing to the nonprofit. They don't have to ask for anything from their donors. In fact, they're putting money back in their donors' pockets, back in their alumni and their network's pockets. I have another friend who I'm actually at his office because I was across town. I have another friend who has a program that is similar to that for nonprofits. It's called Ample Points. And he's sitting right here, actually. Do you mind just telling him in 60 seconds what you guys do? Sure. This is Tony Singh, good friend of mine here in Las Vegas. And speaking of examples, ours takes the approach of cost reduction. His takes the approach of helping partner with local businesses, restaurants, malls, and so forth, creating a rebate program for their customers that in turn can benefit the nonprofits. But yes, you're the expert. Tell them real quick, if you would, about
Hi, my name is Tony Singh, as CEO of AmplePoint.com. Everybody has a value nowadays, and big companies take their information and sell it to the big company for billions of dollars, right? So what we do is we take their information, if we pay back to the customer back for the information, for the interaction, for all the things they do in the reward point. And they can unlimited reward point, and they can donate the reward point to their favorite charities. And charity receive cash or product based on what they're looking for that day. And this will bring a full circle where your member can actually donate the cause of the nonprofit.
Yeah, see, it's just another example, guys, of for-profits benefiting from business, nonprofits benefiting from donations, customers benefiting from better pricing or new introductions or discounted pricing, whatever the case might be. But ultimately, it comes down to getting for-profits, nonprofits, and consumers all on the same page. What's interesting about COVID is people came out of COVID and are coming out of the pandemic with a real desire to do good. There's a sense that while there's still division, there's political strife and so forth, we still have a sense that we're in this together because we all went through it together. There's a great need of nonprofits that are searching for funding. And it's the number one need most nonprofits have. The more funding they have, the more good they can do. But if more companies, both on the nonprofit side and the for-profit side, can join forces in, just as Ample Points is doing, just as we're doing at Certainty Management, some great things can happen. I think it's more than just a model. I think it's a movement, even a mission, even a movement that many companies out there can model their own practices after, their own approaches, and we can do some amazing things. We could really, I think, make a difference for the nonprofits out there that are in such need. So thanks, Tony, for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Hey, this is Joanna, and I just remembered something. Do you guys know Faith Popcorn, the futurist? This was several years ago, and she had a whole presentation on like the future of, of everything. And I remember her saying the future is mobile, social, and local. And I think that describes very much what's happening with fundraising. There's a kind of new tools available, on the mobile platforms. It's very social these days. If you think about how people socialize who they're giving to, they ask for recommendations about who to give to, they do these birthday fundraisers on Facebook, and it's local. I mean, I think that, we give to the local organizations because we feel like they're going to make an impact in our communities, and maybe we distrust, I know for certain the research is showing that we distrust the nationwide organizations a little bit more these days because we just don't know how they're impacting our local communities. So anyway, I just remembered that.
I would agree with Joanna. I think it's a really important point. We have a radio show where we talk about exactly this truth. I mean, this is an absolute truth. I think if we can look right next door, look at the businesses that are right on Main Street, look at the local companies, look at the nonprofits in need, and start more conversation happening. Literally get together in a room at a chamber of commerce or in some sort of venue and put a whiteboard on the wall and say, what can we do to work together more? We're not just asking for donations. When we talk to a prospective client, we say we're not asking for your money, but we are asking you to help. There's a lot of smart people out there, and there is a desire to help. One of the challenges with fundraising is that many large donors, they're afraid to get on a list. If they give once, they're going to be hit up over and over and over again. You see the same people at all of the fundraising galas because they've been hit up again and again and again, and they don't want to say no. But I've talked to many a CEO, many a business owner that are hesitant to get on that list. So how can we overcome that? We've got to give them ways that they can participate that doesn't put a target on their back. There's more reciprocal engagement. I really love the word reciprocity because it has to be beneficial in both ways. How can a nonprofit benefit the for-profit and vice versa rather than just constantly wanting the for-profit to do everything? Now, don't take me wrong, nonprofits are doing a great deal of good. They're all going to be saints in heaven, I'm sure, but at least most of them, but they spend so much time and effort asking for handouts, asking for support. There's got to be a reciprocal relationship. That's what I love about Ample Points and Tony's company. That's why I wanted him to say what he did. It's such a great example of what I'm talking about. That's why we started our Certainty Partners program. That's what Lighthouse Charities here in Vegas is doing, that example I shared with the hotels. There has to be a reciprocal relationship. And if there is, extraordinary things can happen, and we can change our communities, we can change our nation. And so now you're getting me on my soapbox, but it's an exciting approach that's not so one-sided. And in that process, people don't get burned out, and companies and donors don't develop this fear or this resentment. As I said, extraordinary things can happen.
I think we've covered this from a number of angles, and I'm glad you brought up the model side of things, Patrick, and just, fundamentally the model and the way that people are giving and why. Joanna, I know you glanced over it, and I don't know if you mind, but I'd like for you to maybe talk a little bit more about like the actual marketing side and like the actual, when you use the word automations, right? And maybe sometimes there's nonprofits, just like regular businesses, by the way, that are lacking in some of these things that could make them a little bit more operationally efficient or efficient in whatever their day-to-day is. So I don't know if you mind maybe just giving a little bit of what you do to help nonprofits and kind of what you've seen on specifically from the tech side of nonprofits that are really getting this right and being efficient with what they're doing and growing because of it.
Yeah, thanks so much. So this is Joanna. With our clients, say I'm working with a national organization and they say, look, we need to increase our fundraising. We need to increase donations. So it's actually multifaceted, and it almost always starts with like, let's take a look at your analytics to see what the trends are. Who's giving, is giving up or down, which segments are giving, how are they giving, what's the average gift, Are we really going after the large foundation or the corporate donors, or are we going after the, the individual donors? Like, kind of what's the landscape? And then it becomes kind of a selection of the tools that you need for the strategy. So if an organization says to me, look, most of our funding and our focus is really on corporate and foundation donors, that's a very different fundraising strategy. That is, let's make sure that you know who all the foundations and corporations are that actually give in your space. And then let's figure out how you communicate with them. Let's figure out how to make your website speak to them so that if they go to the website, foundation and corporate donors and high net worth individuals, by the way, usually are looking for, what do you do and are you in my giving area? Who else is giving and what is your impact? And it sounds like, gee, everyone who's giving money should be doing that. But usually corporate foundation, program officers, as well as high net worth individuals, they're usually thinking that way, as opposed to the individual who says, is this an organization that I support? They don't necessarily care as much about who else is giving, what corporations are supporting you. Is usually for the individual, do they connect with the mission? Do they agree with it? And is it convenient for them to give? So like once you've figured out, kind of who you're trying to reach and, and kind of, what their motivations are, then you figure out what your tool set is. And I'll give you just some things that we've recommended to clients as kind of low hanging fruit. Number one is just make sure that the website is really optimized for the search engines. Because if you think about it, if I said, hey, I'm looking for an organization that, is doing good in the area of trafficking, right? Helping, Asian girls who are being trafficked. It's actually something that I have done. I said, I'm looking for an organization, that's doing work in this area. So you go to your network, but then you do a bunch of Google searches. And the question is, does Google even know you exist? How do you improve your rank? And then how do you get pushed up in the ranks so that you even get noticed? And then you start to think about, okay, there are influencer sites, and how do you rank on those influencer sites? Do you even have a Google rank? And are there what does the charity navigators of the world say about you? So that's like one whole area, is making sure that if people are researching you on the web or looking for you, that you can be found. And then there's a whole set of tools around if organizations are going after individual, gifts, what's your toolbox? Are you still doing direct mail? For some segments, believe it or not, that still works. Are you doing direct email? Are you doing social? Are you doing texting campaigns? And what I say to my clients is, make sure that you have a way to really see which of those initiatives are working. So we can spend Patrick, I'm sure you and I can spend the whole 3 hours talking about tracking. If you don't have tracking in place, you don't know which initiatives are actually bringing in the money. So which initiatives are actually bringing in money? And then what I say to my clients is every 6 months, evaluate your efforts and see if you can add one thing to the mix. Just one thing. It might be a new automation. It might be a new social platform. It might be some A/B testing in your emails. Whatever it is, do one thing, really geek out on that, see if you can improve the metrics. And then 6 months later, say, have I improved? What have I learned? What capacity have I gained? Now, what can we tackle? So kind of, I don't know if that was what you were looking for, but those are some of the things that we kind of do when clients first approach us when they say, I got to improve my fundraising.
Wow. Hey, it's Jeff from Mission Matters. Wow, that's impressive, Joanna. And also, Patrick, what amazing insight. It sounds to me what I'm getting from this is that, our nonprofits have to up their game and start hiring people like Patrick and Joanna to treat them like traditional businesses and really figure out how to compete on a level playing field, right? And that's so powerful when we get some of the smartest people focused on bringing innovation. It feels like we're on the cusp. I don't know where it comes from. It sounds like you guys are hard at work on it, but it feels like we're innovating and that there's a shift happening. And just one last point, I think it's got to start. We got to educate new generations as well. I've got little kids, and there's some cool, we talked about some interesting ideas. There's some cool community. We talked about local. There's some cool community organizations that are engaging with kids, and you sign up and they send out these opportunities for your kids to go and do different things on the weekends, on the weeks. One thing we've done every year is there's a lot of fruit trees here in California that nobody ends up using the fruit and it just falls onto the ground. And this organization, we meet up and we go out and we clean the trees of these properties. So we're doing a service to the property. And then we're able to take all of this fruit, and they have a kind of a distribution system set up throughout California to get the food to people who need it. Now it's obviously a drop in the bucket of solving some of the bigger problems, but it's really important to get my son and daughter engaged in the beauty and the feeling of being of service, because that's ultimately what drives this, right? Is our concern for wanting to make a difference and to be of service. So I think, that piece of outreach with new generations is going to be super important.
Hey, and Jeff, think about what you just said. So you said it's a local organization that's doing something in your local community, and it's something that you're doing with your children. That's a very different profile from somebody like me a few years ago when I said, look, I'm really interested in, kind of serving on the board or giving to an organization that's, helping, women or girls from Asia who are being trafficked. But what's interesting is your profile is very different, and it's very local, and it has to do with your children. I'm just going to say one more thing, and I know that we're running out of time, and that is, I think Patrick would agree with me. We've been talking about all these different tools, but the one thing that I think we haven't touched on is messaging. And whether it's fundraising or you're selling a widget or you're selling a service, I think we can all agree that the number one kind of trend these days is that it's all about storytelling. And it's about whatever the kind of the point of view of the story. Is it about who you serve? Is it about how you serve? Is it about, whatever it is, or your impact? It's the stories that move people ultimately to make a gift. And increasingly, I think the challenge for fundraising organizations is those stories have to be short, they have to be visual, and they probably have to involve video. So again, just one more thought related to, fundraising.
I agree. Anyone out there who's looking for a system that can do that, I have a very good friend, one of the top marketers in the world. I mean, he's spoken on stages with Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, and he's taught half of the top speakers out there, Tony Robbins and others. But they started a company because this need existed for people and organizations, small or large, to be able to get their message out and to be able to drip on people. Because Joanna's absolutely right. It's the story, and that story has to keep getting told. It takes time to earn trust, right? It takes time to develop that relationship. The little things do matter, and those little extra efforts make a difference, but it takes time. Most people don't donate to an organization the first time they hear about them. And so you have to drip on them with these messages. If somebody wants to learn more, or if they're looking for that system, they're welcome to reach out to us. You can actually, if you text the name Certainty to 26786, I can get you the information on it. It's not something that I represent. It's not a product, but it's not a product I sell, but it's a product that can really do it for you. You can automate it. It's affordable. It's kind of a solution that many of us were looking for. We use it in our business. That word I just gave you, certainty. You text it to 26786, and it will put you into that automation, and I can give you that information. But there's a lot of organizations out there that are looking for that. They're looking to, how do we do this? How do we drip on these customers and build these relationships? And they think they have to spend thousands of dollars and hire programmers. You don't. The technology these days that exists is phenomenal. And so I highly recommend it. But I couldn't agree more, Joanna. This story is where it's at.
All right. So we are just about, we're at the top of the hour now. I think at this point in time, we normally just kind of go around. And if anybody has any closing words or thoughts or anything of that nature, like now's the time to get it out.
Ladies first. Go ahead, Joanna.
So I'm going to share a tip with you guys. So whenever I make a donation, I use a different middle initial, and then I know who shared my name. So
Ooh,
the other thing,
I like that. That's
the
a good
other
one.
thing that I do is, I don't know if you know this, but in your Gmail, so like, my personal Gmail, what you can do is you can do a plus something. So if you do plus whatever, so say I'm giving to Catholic Charities, I would do my Gmail at Catholic Charities plus Catholic Charities at gmail.com. Gmail will recognize that. You can add a filter to it, but again, you'll know who's selling your email. And for me, again, as a former fundraiser, there's a couple of things that I do. I geek out on direct mail. Something comes in the mail, I'll save it and I'll say, oh, I'll look at it. Does this work? Is this effective? I look at packaging. I still geek out on this stuff. When I get great emails, I'll share it with my staff and I'll say, look at this wonderful email. And then it's about the tracking. Where is my email going? And sometimes I get mad and, but again, since I was in the biz, I know it's just part of the game. But it's just interesting to see how far and wide my information has gotten sold and rented.
I love the different initial idea. That's a great idea, Joanna. No, I know we're up at the top of the hour, but thanks for having us on, guys. If I have one plug, it's actually a plug for Mission Matters, because you guys do such a great job of getting your message out in multiple different ways, through the podcast, through the book, and the publishing, and the social media, and your YouTube, and the interviews you do, Adam. I mean, it's actually a really great example of what every nonprofit out there should do. If they don't know where to start, they should talk to you guys. I mean, I know you do that, and you do it for companies. We're not experts. We're learning as we go. I think we all are, but there are companies like Mission Matters, whether you use them or someone else. You got to get somebody who's really good at what they do. They can help you. They can teach you the technologies. They can automate a lot of that for you. Most of us, we're not experts in that field, and so we've got to rely on somebody. It might take a little bit of investment, but it will come back to you tenfold. And so, I'm a big fan of you guys at Mission Matters, with the book series we're in and everything else. But
Same here.
Whoever you use, whoever's listening to this, find someone to help you. Don't try to do it on your own.
Hi, it's Jeff Gorskog. On that point, and I just had one to wrap up with a question. Maybe you guys can help us or direct me towards a resource. If you're a person and you're looking to invest and you want to do some just shallow diligence on entities, is there a centralized kind of place people go to check out nonprofits where there's, it seems like it's kind of decentralized? Is there a trusted place that people go to do a little bit of diligence?
Well, if they're big enough, you go to Charity Navigator.
Right.
It's like a guide star. And then I know here in Alexandria, for example, I think there's a local charity guide.
Right.
The other thing is, I definitely, Google will do reviews.
Yeah.
And then there are like these stealth places that you can look. Like you can check out an organization on Glassdoor, for example, and sometimes, get the skinny on what they're doing. The other thing is, like, I go to, if I'm really kind of researching an organization, then I will download their 990. And that gives me a sense of, like, is this CEO, making $3 million, but the organization is bleeding money? Like, I don't begrudge these CEOs large salaries if the organizations are doing well and they've got high impact. But I've seen organizations that are bleeding money and the CEO is making a fortune, and like they will never get my money.
Right. I completely agree that the resource we use to research most nonprofits, and it's right in line with what Joanna's talking, if you type in the name of a nonprofit with the word ProPublica, PROPUBLIC.
Yes, good resource.
It brings up their tax filings for the year. You can click on the whole filing and literally see what they're spending on everything, on toilet paper. It goes down to the details. It's a really great resource to see if it's a nonprofit you'd like to be involved with, you'd like to donate to or volunteer with. It's really a great resource. Great resource if you're looking for somewhere to serve, the opportunities that have been vetted. I'm a big fan of justserve.org. They list local service projects. It could be helping clean the park down the street or assisting with a homeless shelter or something. Both of those are really good resources.
Hi, it's Jeff again. Thank you both. Those are great resources. And I just wanted to say one last thing that I learned today, because I'm trying to be teachable here. I think you said something really, really insightful, Joanna, which, I think a lot of times we hear, the CEO is making a ton of money and it's a small part of the of the money's flowing towards the impact. But you know what? You open my eyes to something, and it's just like any other business, I guess. Depending on what your strategy is and your objectives and how you're operating, then your margins are going to be different. So I think to assume that a company that's throwing off 5% is better than a company is being run more effectively than a company that's, you know, throwing off less or more, I guess you're right. There's not one size fits all. So you kind of open my mind to that. I guess if you're, you know, depending on which segment you're chasing, your margins are going to be different, and that's not going to necessarily reflect how well you're running your company. So I think we need to look a little deeper there, obviously.
All right. What a great discussion today. I mean, this has been, I learned a lot. I think it's been a lot of fun. I'm excited for the next one. I know. So next week we'll be here again at same time. So 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time will be our next Twitter space for everybody that's listening to this. For now, just to do the closing, thank you for everybody for coming on the show, and or I should say on our Twitter space. And until the next time, thanks again, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Joanna, thanks for all your great comments. I learned a lot.
Yeah. Patrick and
Patrick,
Joanna.
thank you, all of you. I loved it. Thank you. I really like these discussions. Thanks for hosting them.
Yeah, it's fun.
All right. See you later. Bye.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.